Right, and we are live. We had a couple of technical difficulties. I don't know what was going on, but we're getting started. So, welcome to the DoorGrow Show. If you are a property management entrepreneur that wants to add doors, make a difference, increase revenue, help others, impact lives, and you are interested in growing your business and life, and you are open to doing things a bit differently, then you are a DoorGrow hacker. DoorGrow hackers love the opportunities, daily variety, unique challenges, and freedom that property management brings. Many in real estate think you're crazy for doing it. You think they're crazy for not, because you realize that property management is the ultimate high trust gateway to real estate deals, relationships, and residual income. At DoorGrow, we are on a mission to transform the property management businesses and their owners. We want to transform the industry, eliminate the BS, build awareness, change perception, expand the market, and help the best property managers win. I'm your host, property management growth hacker, Jason Hull, the founder of Open Potion, Gather Kudos, Thunder Local, and of course, DoorGrow. Now let's get into the show. So today I'm hanging out with Chuck Hattemer of One Rent. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this community, Jason, and I'm really excited to be a part of the show today.
Fantastic. So Chuck, you must have a really interesting story. You look like a pretty young dude. You've got this really thriving business that people dream of. And so today we're talking about maybe some of the systems and processes that to scale, to your size, like 2,000 doors. But I want to start with your story. Share a little bit of background about how you got into property management and how One Rent kind of came to be.
Sure. Yeah. So, it is. I'm obviously, somewhat younger and newer to the industry. I don't have the, 25 years in real estate on my business card. That's often one of the biggest challenges. But the way that we got in real estate and property management was back in college, and my co-founders and I here at One Rent, we were students just here in California at Santa Clara University, and we had this just awful housing experience as renters, and really, it felt like the Hunger Games. Everyone was, talking about which house they wanted to get. They're renting them a year in advance. People were, lining up outside of the property manager's offices with checks to try and save their spot. And if anyone here manages student housing, how that goes, and it's really just a huge pain for the student. And so we actually initially approached the business from the renter perspective in 2014, and we really started with just a pure platform. We were into technology prior to property management and real estate. I myself was running a web design business with the family, and I had also been involved in film production. Funny enough, completely unrelated, but really what I loved and what drew me to real estate was this concept that you could actually impact some of the most sensitive parts of people's livelihood, whether it's their investment as the owner or whether it's their home as the renter. And that really spoke to me, and I saw a huge potential impact that you could have from a technology perspective, given just how stagnated the industry has become in terms of growth and technology adoption. So we started with our first platform. It was just a student housing listing platform with a few extra bells and whistles online. We worked with the local property managers, and we brought on about 90% of the inventory. We kind of bootstrapped our initial business, brought about 90% of the inventory around the market onto our platform, processed over $3 million in rent. And then, we kind of took that as a model to a group of investors here in Silicon Valley, and, the kind of typical startup story, but we raised some seed capital. And at that point, we had raised seed capital, we had this proven model, but the college housing season was over. And so we kind of, and what we thought is, okay, well, the only way we're going to be able to expand is really wait until the next college rental cycle.
Right.
So we took kind of a hard look at what that model was, and saw a lot of problems with it. First of all, there's hundreds of platforms and utility platforms out there today, and we did notice some of the local property managers, there wasn't a huge interest from them to pay for our service, and also every single property manager wanted a customized solution, and we ended up just going to start building Appfolio again. We don't want to do that. Appfolio has already figured that out, those PMS systems. So we pivoted to full service property management about the end of 2015. And then in the beginning of 2016, we started with our kind of beta group of customers. And we've scaled that since now over 2,000 doors leased and managed. So that's kind of our background story and the pivots we went through to get to where we are now.
Awesome. That's such a different start in several ways. I mean, one, coming from the renter's side first and having that perspective. Most people start their property management businesses from the side of the investor first, and they're looking at it through that filter. And so how do you feel that gave you, how's that perspective different for you? How do you think that helped you guys do things differently? What advantage is that?
Yeah, I think you coming from the renter's perspective and also coming into the industry without a lot of experience, you're obviously, we were and we still are in many ways, naive about many different things. And so it almost is that naivete that allows us to kind of think of new solutions and think of things out of the box that there may already be a system or process designed to accomplish this goal, but we just don't have the. So we're looking at things from a very fresh perspective, from a technology perspective, and coming from the renter side, what really made us understand kind of the impact we could have in property management was that if you just talk to renters, renters hate their landlords more than they hate their tax accountants, and that's kind of like landlords and property managers have this reputation in the industry among renters. And by focusing on that first, we were able to kind of peel back the onion on what are the true problems that people are facing? How can we make this experience more consistent no matter what property you go to? And how does that value translate back to value for the investor in terms of reduced costs, reduced vacancy, better tenants, all that? So that's really, kind of that approach, some naivete around it, and just being open to all the problems and not just saying, oh, that's just the way it is because I've been doing this for 25 years, but being open to all the problems and say, okay, these are all problems. What are going to have the most impact? And your perspective, that is where you can really grow the brand. For every one property owner we interact with, we deal with 10 different renters. So the volume and the impact and the potential reach of your brand and of your service through consumers and through renters has a much higher reach.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective to think of it from that perspective. I know that we're renting right now in California, and rent's pretty high where we're at. And we picked the company based on obviously researching the management companies, because I know management companies, and I was like, I want to make sure we're with somebody that's really good. And if we're going to be here, and figure out if we want to set down roots in this area.
Exactly.
And everybody said, use this company, not this one, because there were two major players in the market. In fact, my sister-in-law was renting, and she said, she's like, oh, we were with this other company, and this new company is way better. And their reviews online showed the same sort of story. And so it was pretty obvious, we're only going to look at rentals in this company's portfolio for vacancy, not these guys.
Exactly.
And we had the experience of directly with a homeowner, and that was terrible because maintenance was like nothing was getting dealt with. And I'm one of the few crazy people in probably the real estate industry that enjoys renting, because I don't want I want to lower my personal pressure and noise. I don't want to be dealing with coordinating all the vendors that are facilitating this machine running that I call my household. So
yeah. And that's the trend with people my age, the millennial generation. We're putting our money into other things. We're investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum. We're not investing in real estate, and so the demand is only growing among this generation. In terms of home ownership, I do think that what'll be interesting is as we grow up and get to the point where we can actually start deploying capital in real estate. I think there will be a big move of kind of these first time investors. And that's fueled in a large part by technology and kind of unlocking that information that makes it okay to make a decision to buy a home, even though you're not going to go out there and visit it. So yeah, so I really think that the renters are not only kind of our the largest reach that we have, but they're also potentially future customers for us.
Yeah, and I love
from
what
an
you were
owner
also
side.
saying is that yeah, and you can convert them, into customers. But I love what you were saying earlier is that you saw that this was a way of impacting lives. And how's it sort of driven your culture and your mission, from the beginning, recognizing that this is a way of impacting lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one of the first kind of conscious decisions that we made was not necessarily, we tried bringing on a lot of like very experienced property management professionals, and there are some really top-notch people in our markets, and we had the opportunity to kind of work with them in the past. But what we found with bringing on a lot of big property management professionals with lots of experiences, there was kind of this predetermined set of expectations or rules around property management, in terms of how you interact with tenants, and how you interact with owners, and kind of the every tenant wants all their deposit back, or so screw all tenants kind of mentality, or oh, these owners are always knocking down my door. And don't get me wrong, there are very frustrating situations like that, and it's good to vent at those times. And it's great that you built a community, Jason, that where people can find help for those kind of challenges. So, but for us, that was really an important decision, was actually getting fresh talent in the company, people that could see this from an entirely new perspective. And through the execution and hustle, they were able to learn and kind of develop the knowledge, and develop some bruises along the way of how property management worked. But really kind of a key part of our culture is it's okay to fail, and going fast, and you're applying your learnings into the next kind of initiative, then that is a sign that you're making progress towards being successful, and keeping that culture really rich, and really just focusing on executing, and being okay with letting people fail, because people to take more risks. That's a huge part of our culture, and something that's really core among all the teams here.
That's a big deal to me. I tell everybody that I bring on my team that I want you to feel very safe to make decisions, very safe to make mistakes. And I think if we build a culture around where anybody sees, because as entrepreneurs, sometimes we're a bit strong-willed, we're a bit strong in our way of doing things. Sometimes we're a bit strong in our presentation, and things. A lot of times we walk into a room and it feels like we've just dropped a grenade. I've heard it said, and then we walk out and we think we just shared something amazing. Here's this great idea, and everybody's like, "Oh no!" So yeah, I think creating a culture is, in which everybody is allowed to say, "Hey, I'm stuck here," or "Hey, I'm having problems," and there's as opposed to challenges. So one of the biggest things we do internally is we ask, we have weekly reports, and we're asking everybody, where did you win this week? Because we want to, increase that and pay attention to that. And where do you feel stuck? Like where, and I got the idea from hanging out with Jason Fried, of Basecamp fame.
Yeah.
And, where are you stuck? Where do you feel like you could use some additional support? And then I see my job and my role as CEO or as entrepreneur to support my team. Their role is to help support me in my dreams and visions. And so it's this mutually symbiotic relationship. But it's so common to see when businesses are struggling, to see the entrepreneur blaming their team and coming down on their team. And it just creates a culture of fear. It creates a culture in which they feel like they can't fail or make mistakes. So they start hiding stuff. And then, then weird things start happening, like embezzlement or secrets, or internal politics gets really crazy. And there's this culture of gossip and like fear.
Yeah.
And so I think that I really resonate with the idea of impacting lives.
Yeah.
I see that there's this massive potential for property managers to create this ripple effect throughout the US and beyond, and impact millions of lives. And I see my role as helping do that through my clients. And so if I'm able to get my clients in a space where they're creating this positive impact, that ripple effect is exponential.
Yeah, exactly.
That gets me really excited.
Yeah, and what's unique about our kind of internal company organization and culture is, we've set up our internal team into dedicated lines of business and dedicated teams. So each part of the rental process is managed by its own team, and this is pretty different from traditional management, where the same person who you call to sign up for a property manager is also the person who's screening the tenants and showing the property. And that's largely, there's over 200,000 property managers in the U.S. and 50% of the revenue of a property manager is spent on just labor alone. And it's not necessarily looked as something that is a huge moneymaker. It's usually an input into your brokerage business or your sales business. And so there's been kind of a stagnation of development in the internal team structure and company organization. And of course, there are some pros to that. You get a dedicated single point of contact, someone you can kind of hold accountable from beginning to end. But when we talk to our customers and we ask them, what is really important about that single line of contact? What really matters at the end of the day? Is it actually having a single point of contact? And the reality is it's actually getting the job done well and keeping them updated. That's what matters. If there's multiple people behind the scenes taking care of that, as long as that's done, the customer is happy. And that's what our customers tell us. And so part of our great internal team is that, we have these dedicated teams for maintenance, leasing, sales, inbound customer support, customer success, and accounting. So each team has its own kind of group, and we build the technology that connects these teams together, and it also creates a great collaborative environment, because as everyone knows, in property management, everything is connected. When a maintenance bill comes in, accounting gets involved, customer success needs to get involved because the tenant may be unhappy or the owner may be unhappy. So those kind of things are really important, and if you celebrate those wins, like you're saying, sending out those weekly reports celebrating the wins, one way we do it is on Slack. Slack is an internal tool for our company for chat, and Slack has very simple, easy to use integrations. And so if you have a team, especially a remote team, if you're working with virtual assistants or folks offshore, you can get them all on Slack and you can integrate so that you can celebrate wins as they come in. A new door is brought on, and it's those small moments that really drive the team to not only be motivated and happy, but also a little bit competitive with each other, and it drives that success. So I definitely believe that.
I want to go back to something you said. So you had mentioned that you looked at some of the typical business models in property management, and so the two typical business models are portfolio style or departmental. And it sounds like yours is kind of a variation of departmental, but it's almost like maybe a new one, maybe like workflow, like workflow stage, oriented teams. Mm-hmm. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, we kind of cut off the realm of responsibility once it gets too far from, I guess, the mean kind of work. So a maintenance ticket or comes in, if it's a maintenance that's related to routine maintenance on the property, windows, the maintenance team will handle that. But if it's a little bit outside of that, kind of one standard deviation away, where it's an owner is asking about paying their utility bills, where the customer may think it's related to maintenance, but it's actually related to customer success, because that's more something that doesn't involve working with vendors. It doesn't involve coordinating with the tenants to schedule vendors. So that's kind of how it's definitely kind of workflow organized, like you said, and really making sure people are specializing in one area.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, so that's fascinating. So another thing you pointed out that I thought was interesting is you mentioned that initially you were trying to do a completely different business. You were trying to create a software, and then you decided to shift to doing property management, and you had to pivot. How important have you seen making pivots and changes in the business be, and is that something you see as a common thing in property management? I'd love your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. The pivots were instrumental. We wouldn't we wouldn't be able to be where we are right now in terms of scale without some of the kind of tough decisions and quick pivots we had to make. I think, part of it is the fact that we are a venture-backed company, and so we do have a certain responsibility to ourselves, to our employees, to our investors, that we need to be scaling this business. The folks that invested in our company are not looking for a lifestyle business. They want a high growth operation, and we want that, obviously, and we believe that can be achieved and can have this national brand for property management, which has never really existed before. So yeah, those
Right.
pivots were super important, and we've had to make some really tough ones in the past. For us, the software to service pivot was obvious. It was, we it literally started with kind of the idea of Uber for property management. Why doesn't that exist? Because a lot of at the time when we were doing student housing platform, we had two types of customers. We had property managers and individual investors and owners. And the individual investors and owners would come to us and say, hey, the software is great, but the real pain is in the operational components, the showings, taking time out of my day to do showings, doing maintenance, all of those little service oriented things. Willing to pay for that, and
Right.
at the end of the day, when you get stuck and your business is not growing where you want it to go, I always say, one of the best ways to get unstuck is just talk to customers. Get out of the building, just start talking to them. You don't need to think of an idea before you go talking to them. You can just have questions, and that'll lead you to where your next pivot's going to be.
Yeah, love it. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think the idea is just to be a customer-centric company.
Mm-hmm.
If you're client-centric in your focus, then that's who pays you. That's where you get the money, typically. So if you're client-centric and that's your focus, as opposed to what I see some companies do is they try to sell what they can sell instead of what their customers actually need. And so we pivoted as a company. I mean, one of the biggest things, we were trying to sell marketing at first, and we found that customers couldn't use marketing. So then we decided, because they weren't ready for it. So we're like, how can we get them ready? So we built a process to take them through to get them ready for marketing, to turn them into marketing clients. The side effect was it was so effective, they didn't need marketing anymore. So then we had to pivot again. So then we're like, okay, well, this is we'll make this even better and make this our core product offering. And then we'll shift into what's the next step, because it's creating this new problem where growth is no longer their issue. It's how do I deal with growth? So now we're adding new layers and new levels of products and services beyond that. And we've shifted largely away from being a marketing agency doing the typical stuff.
Yeah.
And so,
and you probably
we're getting into groups, we're getting into maybe BDM placement, some of these, lots of trainings, it's totally different direction, but it's what people need.
Yeah. And I'm sure you didn't, but it wasn't something that you just changed everything all at once. It's kind of you made these iterative changes over time, and that's super important to keep in mind, especially in property management, because it's such a vast scope of services and features that you're trying to offer to people. And so, by no means we're not perfect yet, and we haven't fully unlocked that kind of perfect client-centric view, but we have a vision of what we think that looks like in the future, and we're really committed to kind of building that out, and we are looking for it to be a hyper growth thing. This is not something that is feeding a sales business for us. We have no brokerage business. We're pure property management.
So let's talk about how can people that are much smaller, they're maybe trying to grow their business, what could they do to be a little bit more like OneRent? I mean, you're not all over the planet yet competing with everybody yet. So maybe you could help some other guys out. What could they do to, have similar sort of success that you think that maybe they're not doing?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you have to kind of ask yourself is, what scale do you want to get to? What is the purpose of your property management business? If it's something that is, feeding a sales brokerage, that's fine. It's just, it matters how you kind of think about that question to begin with. Planning process and systems for growth. Typical property managers spend less than 2% of revenue on growth. there's a huge opportunity to kind of increase that number, but you're going to have to take some dollars out somewhere, and that usually is in labor. That's the biggest chunk, around 50%. So if you are interested in kind of rapidly scaling the business, the kind of exercise that we've developed and building kind of our growth model is really starting with what is your key output metric. For us, that key output metric is leased units. So then you take, it's monthly leased units, and kind of a key performance indicator of that is the time it takes to lease a property. And the reason that those are key metrics are, number one, it's the closest tied to revenue and customer satisfaction. If you can, lease a property fast, then that probably means that the renter is happy because they got to move in quickly. The owner is happy because you reduce their vacancy costs. And then when it comes to, and it also represents kind of the productivity of the efficiency of your operation. So it's a really great metric for us, monthly leased units. Kind of start to peel back the onion a little bit, and we say, okay, that's our output. Now, what are all the inputs into that output? So, you take the customer life cycle and you think about everything from signing up new owners to, the number of views on your listings, to the number of inquiries on your listings, to the number of showings scheduled, to the number of applications, all the way down to leases. And you can take each one of those inputs and peel it back even further if you'd like. And that exercise, if you do that and you kind of chart this out and write it down into what we call kind of a qualitative growth model, is actually a really great exercise to prioritize what to work on first. Because what you'll be able to do is, if you plug in numbers into all those things and say, okay, in a month, we lease this number of units, we get this number of applications, number of showings, all the way up to the funnel, and you start to tweak those numbers, you can start to see where you're going to have the greatest impact. And so you can really start to build out your initiatives. So for example, if number of applications is a key metric to driving your output, then what you'll say, okay, this has the highest impact. If I change these numbers on Excel, that delivers the greatest impact to that monthly leased units. So let me more applications. Maybe you make your applications free and you eat the cost because it'll get paid off. Maybe you figure out a way that you can automate more of the application process or start earlier on during the showing process. So some of those exercises are really great to just start to build efficiencies and process into your operation. The other thing is, I think that there is an element of being departmental in terms of unlocking that growth. For us, we have a sales team, so an inside sales team. We have sales development representatives who are doing both outbound and inbound demand generation and qualifying leads. They process around 3,000 leads a month, and on outbound. So that team, and then we have account executives who are closing those deals. So we have a very defined inside sales process that has been really key to our growth. And then the second thing is for us, again, developing that credibility. When people look at us, they don't think we're or experience in real estate. So we've tried to develop a lot of partnerships in the business. So we've aligned ourselves with some of the biggest real estate brokerages here in the Bay Area where we're based out of, and we also service up in Seattle and down in San Diego. So partnering with real estate agents and that credibility for our business. If you train them well, they act as sales agent. Any client who may be interested about buying an investment property, now instead of that real estate agent running away because they don't want to touch property management, they can say yes to that client, and they can say, hey, OneRent is our partner for that. So some of those key initiatives have been really big for us in terms of unlocking that growth, starting from an internal process point of view and identifying those inputs and where you're going to have the highest impact, all the way to how you structure the internal organization.
And this is a very software kind of nerdy way of doing it, right? And I think your background in software kind of helped you see and look at the business in this way, right? Because software is all about if-thens and process and whether things are working. And so you had mentioned like time to lease being like your biggest key performance indicator to look at. What do you, based on your experience, what are some of the most significant constraints that you were dealing with there?
Yeah, so time to lease, the inputs for time to lease, if you think about that, are going to be the top of funnel is going to be, the exposure that your listings are getting, how many leads you're getting, the inquiries. Middle of funnel is going to be showings and applications. And then kind of the bottom of funnel is going to be those leases signed and kind of the qualified applications. So for us, the top of funnel is where we focused on first, is really because that had the highest impact initially. So really trying to find unique ways that we can bring new exposure to a property and make it super easy for people to get to the next step, which is scheduling a showing. And so what we found, again, this coming from the renter perspective, gave us some unique ideas here. As renters, we were going to 10 different landlords, back and forth over email. You go on Craigslist, you find 10 listings. 3 of those are probably expired or already rented. 2 of those are already, are scams probably. So you're left with 5 listings, and you've already spent all this time, and you're trying to schedule showings. So that was the first thing, making it super easy to schedule showings and making it on demand. So for us, a renter can schedule a showing 7 days a week, 8 hours every day, anytime. And we'll essentially dispatch what we call a mobile manager, which is kind of like an Uber driver for OneRent, who will come out to the property, show it, and then provide feedback from the tenant. And then the next thing was applications. So that was the next kind of biggest constraint. Was people, usually have to pay $30 to $40 application fees. There's document collection. If anyone's doing, collecting W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, takes forever. So what we did is we made the application free, and then we've plugged in with different software where you can, scan your ID and autofill all your application, run the credit check, background check, eviction history check, income verification, all within a span of a couple hours. And that was drastically different than what we're seeing on the market. And once you apply to one of our properties, you're automatically applied to all of our properties, essentially. So that was really big. So yeah, so for us, it was really showings and making that super flexible, applications, and then just little tweaks here and there throughout the process to follow up automatically and with all the prospects. For example, when they're at a showing, 20 minutes after the showing start time, they'll receive a text message survey automatically that says, hey, what'd you think of the property? Respond A if you're interested, B if you're not interested, C if you're not sure yet. If they respond A, we immediately reply with application link, which they can do on their phone. If they respond B, not interested, then we'll ask them why, and we'll also send them a list of similar properties. And if they answer C, they say not sure, we ask them for that feedback, and then that feedback is actually direct back to the owner. So those were some big initiatives, just small tweaks here and there. And then right now, something that we're really focused on is pricing. How do we start a property at the right price? Everyone in property management knows that there's always a price for every property. It'll rent eventually. It's just a matter of how low your owner is willing to go. And so what we're doing now is really educating property owners on. We've collected a ton of data in terms of leasing properties, and so what we've run some kind of data analysis around this, and what we've identified is if someone lists their property too far above market, above the median kind of market rent that we got from comps when we first started, if they list too far above initially, then they're kind of screwed, and their listing is going to stay on the market for far too long. If you rent it just a little bit above market, we actually do a pretty good job of getting people an couple extra bucks there. But there's that threshold when you go too far. And that's a big initiative right now, is we're really trying to kind of arm our team with the right resources, the right knowledge about the real estate market and what's going on in our local communities and in terms of the supply and demand in order to get better pricing.
Yeah, super cool. So, so one of the advantages you had coming into the space is not being a property manager, and I've seen that be a very competitive advantage for me. And the advantage is that you're coming with fresh eyes. You're looking at it through a fresh filter, and you're not just following the status quo and doing what everybody else does. How can property managers do that? Because they've been involved in NARPM, they've been around everybody else, they've heard all this, everybody's doing it this way, and they're this is how it's done. and how can they escape that and look at things through fresh eyes? Any ideas there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you know, my kind of immediate reaction to that would be, again, get out of the building and talk to the customer, and do so in a manner where you have a completely open mind to any of the problems, and and document all those problems that you're hearing from the customers, and then you can kind of organize them into what you want to tackle, what you don't want to tackle, but you have to go in with a very open mind initiative, in order to keep yourself from saying, well, I know that's a problem, but it's always a problem in this industry. And as soon as you start doing that, you stop being a pioneer, right? If you want to be a pioneer, you have to be open to some of the that people have, and being willing to kind of jump at that and solve it. So yeah, I would say, talk to your customers with an open mind, ask them open-ended questions to get feedback. And for if you have property yourself, think about your own problems as a property owner, and think about how you can optimize there. Oftentimes the best way to start a new business is to kind of solve your own problems first, and once you start doing that, you start feeling good about trying new things, and you're really getting that momentum.
Yeah, I love it. So I think once you identify some of these challenges, so I love to ask people, what's your biggest challenge with X, whatever that X is. And, what's your biggest challenge with growing your property management business, or what's your biggest challenge with this? And I always get really great feedback. They tell me what their biggest challenges, at least from their perspective. And then a great follow-up question to ask yourself is, if I could solve this problem, because entrepreneurs, we love solving problems. We're like hardwired to do it. We hear a problem, we feel like solving. So if I could solve this problem, what would that look like? And just be open to those ideas. So if I could help people grow without spending a ton of money on marketing, what would that look like? What would be the best way to do that? And these are the questions that kind of drove our seed package process and helped us find some really innovative, ideas. And so I think in business, ask yourself these open-ended questions as well. Just, those that are listening, ask yourself, if I could solve this, or if we could eliminate this, even though everybody's dealing with it, what would that maybe look like? What could we do there? So,
and often, take a big problem and you can break it down to smaller components, and, again,
absolutely.
Don't try to solve everything at once, or you'll drive yourself crazy and you'll never do it. And I've seen some people post in the group, language that they're editing within their contracts. Like, even those are small, meaningful changes that doesn't take a ton of time. You could start with just a sentence that you jot down, and you show it to customers and say, what would you think if this was in the contract? Would that help you solve a problem? And then if enough people say yes, then you can go back to your lawyer and do all the rest of the work. But start with something small and scrappy.
Yeah, absolutely. My last interview was with Tim Francis, and he talked about this concept. He kept talking about unpacking it. So you take whatever the problem is and then unpack it, because there's probably multiple levels to that. Maybe you can't deal with one thing. Maybe there's something else you can take care of, though. And a lot of times we group it all together and think, oh, it's this problem and it's unsolvable. But if we unpack it, there's probably several elements to that problem that can be resolved or taken care of or mitigated or changed, and it reduces the size and the scale of that issue. So yeah, love that.
Like it. That's awesome.
Well, Chuck, I really appreciate you coming out, spending all this time. How can people that are like wanting to check you out and check out OneRent, how can they get a hold of you, or how can they learn about your business? What's the best way?
Connect with me on LinkedIn, what other property managers are doing all across the country, and would love to kind of open up the conversation there, and on the group as well. Jason's the DoorGrow group, which has been really cool for us and our team. Actually, if they're feeling like they're in a lonely spot in the world, they'll go to that group and say, wow, there's other people who are having these problems too. So it's been a big morale support for our team. But yeah, our website is onerent.co. not .com. That's expensive domain, but onerent.co. I'm on LinkedIn. I've also dabbled with Quora a little bit, so check me out there and shoot me a message, or check out our website.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Chuck. And if you guys want to get in on the DoorGrow Club, it's a free Facebook group. The engagement is absolutely insane. And we've got some of the savviest property management entrepreneurs on the planet in there. And you can get to that just by going to doorgrowclub.com. It'll redirect you right to the Facebook group. And we'd love to have you in there. Make sure you answer the questions or we won't let you in. We're really careful about who we let in. And it's only for property management business owners and entrepreneurs. So if you are a principal or key person at the top of a property management company, then you're the person that we will approve and let into the group. So, and it's really positive momentum based.
It's a shining light. It is awesome. A shining light.
Well, cool. I appreciate you plugging my group. So reach out to Chuck for ideas. And Chuck, really appreciate it. Looking forward to connecting with you more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
All righty.